Welcome back to the show, all. We're here for another brief section. I thought we'd begin this series of multiple versions of. So we call it All Versions of ... And I'm your host, Sully, and I figured to start it off, we're going to cover all the various movies and shows with different director's cuts, special editions, extended TV versions, everything from better known ones like Blade Runner and Touch of Evil to Apocalypse Now, to even just other awkward TV edits like Cobra and The Keep and other just hidden gems. Some of them enhance the movie and others are still a mess. Some are less messy and some are pure perfection. Joining me is the duo from Slept on Cinema, which analyzes just totally just audience split movies. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, you were on our podcast for Femme Fatale, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't shut up.
No, it was great. That was a great episode. I'm glad you recommended that movie.
Yeah.
I still think that is my favorite movie that we've done on the entire series. That was, I purchased it. I purchased the movie for doing it, and I'm so glad because that movie was awesome.
Right? And they've done it all, guys. They've done everything from Jennifer's Body to Lake Placid to all other sorts of just films where you're just like, yeah, that is pretty well loved, but you kind of forget because like those who are swear by the meter on the Rotten Tomatoes side are like, oh, it was never good. And then there's others like, I've seen it, I've owned it, I've seen it every time it's on TV. It's easygoing junk food. Why is this bad?
Yeah, this is a nice change of pace for us. We only do movies that are under 50 in both audience and critics. So this is cool doing a movie that's like well known to be a very, very good movie. And
everything.
It was a lot of fun watching this and getting ready for this.
Yeah. So before we started, I was just like, yeah, what's a movie you guys just swear by? And Robocop was one of the many options. And I was like, okay, perfect. So for this, I just figured that'd be the perfect way to start off, just alternate versions of and so forth. And more recently, Arrow released the complete uncut version. And so for the longest time, yes, Robocop was very much, as a cool parallel to start this off, was much like Scarface, where it had to be resubmitted multiple times, and people were always like, where can I get the X-rated version? Because usually when you think of the X, you're like, oh, if it's graphic and dialogue or sexual content. Is like, no, it's nothing pornographic. It's very gory. And given Paul Verhoeven's, Dutch culture and how satirical he is, if you watch his native language movies, which are very good, Flesh and Blood and The Fourth Man are great, and early roles for the likes of Rutger Hauer, and he's still currently working. But yeah, Robocop is what got him on the scene, and I think, as we all know, it's a satirical movie, but the dumb crowd just sees a very well done action movie. The rest of us see a very emotional, darkly amusing, and clever, cyberpunk, tell. What was your introduction to it? You two.
I probably watched it first as probably a young child that was probably too young to be watching this.
It's very common. So it can't be too good. It's G.I. Joe. Yay.
Right, exactly. So I was definitely renting it on a VHS from Blockbuster, and
no warnings.
It was awesome, right? I mean,
did you mean RoboCop free? You can see that. No, I want to see the OG, the one that's legit good. That would be a fun one for you guys to do on your show. RoboCop free. Is it good or bad?
Oh, we'll check that out. I forget that one.
I love how the DVD has like one of the few good reviews. Hell, I'll recommend a few other ones for you guys to do that are often pretty well liked, but just still have a shitty rating.
But it's totally, as you said, I feel like as a kid, I enjoyed it just because it was this badass, awesome, really well done action movie. And then you, as you grow with the movie, you're like, oh, this is actually so much more than that. It is, an awesome, badass action movie, but it's also this kind of really complex critique of government and politics and the economic interaction between government and crime, and
right.
There's just a lot there that you don't need to see to enjoy, but you can watch it and enjoy it in a number of different ways.
1,000%. And it's funny when some adults don't even get it. I brought that up to Mom. You do realize that's a metaphor for Jesus Christ. She's like, no, I thought he just got murdered. It's like, well, Notice how he's holding it up. It's just a visual cue. So yeah, it's some people.
I thought it was Verhoeven wanted it to show like Satan killing Jesus Christ in that scene where Murphy
occurred.
My intro to it, I think I wasn't allowed to see it when it came out. What was it, 87? Yeah, it was
same. I had to watch it on like edited DVDs and TV versions, and still a pretty cool movie regardless. But it's just keep it in mind. And how unfortunate that my intro, I would always see parts of part 2 on TV, and it just can't hold a candle. It takes itself way too serious, and you're just like, I prefer the first one. And it's a shame because you look at RoboCop as a whole, and it's like, people are divided on the remake. I thought the Prime Directive Sci-Fi Channel miniseries was kind of underrated. It's just people shit on it nowadays because it is Canadian, low budget Canadian gem. But I mean, it's lived on with comics, and crossed over with the Terminator, which was an epic comic for me to read growing up.
Yeah, I had seen. I just started watching there's like a 2.5 hour behind the scenes on YouTube of this movie. And they said how the writers of the movie didn't watch, like Terminator had come out around the same time that they were writing the script, and they didn't want to be influenced by the writing of T2 because it's another like post-apocalyptic type sort of like dystopian world where there's a robot who's basically Clint Eastwood doing this thing, and so. They waited till they finished writing it to go see Terminator, which I thought was pretty cool to have that sort of restraint, so they didn't end up taking anything from the Terminator.
Yeah, they used like maybe one Blade Runner visual cue or segment, but that's it. It's its own deal. So yeah, it had to be resubmitted. It originally got an X by the MPAA.
Was it 8? Was it 8 times? I think it got X'd.
I think so. I don't, with Scarface, it was about 4 times, although that was ironic because basically it's like De Palma was just noticing they were getting like stuck up with the dialogue, but they kept submitting it for the rating, for the violence. And I find it cool because much like the Blu-ray for that, where they've allowed a lot of special features where you can turn on a kill counter or, cursing counter. They also allow you to go to individual scenes where you can see the cheesy TV edits in individual scenes. You can pause the movie and go to that scene. And they've done that with the Arrow Blu-ray as well with this RoboCop. It's uncut version remastered, new version remastered as best as possible. And not new, the original version. And it will allow you to jump to cheesy TV edits, where they cut away from people being run over or,
From what I read, it was the boardroom scene with Ed 209. That was a big
that was always
because you can show a bunch of people getting killed in like the coke den with the the Italian mafia or whatever. But once it got to the boardroom, it was too real for the executives.
I think it was just it was pretty intense for me as a kid, even seeing it modified. I think it's just the Foley and just the intensity of it all, but it does kind of almost have a Cronenberg Scanners segment. And then the rest of the time, it's just someone briefly showing cleavage in a scene, and then just everyone cursing in every other scene. Even though it's not, to call it gratuitous is like to just not get the point of Verhoeven. But with Scarface, it was a fun parallel because it's like they weren't disgusted by anything else, which involves incest and people at a strip club, but they noticed it was just the final shootout in Scarface that was just getting that rating. And so De Palma kept doing different edits, and then finally I think he changed like one different segment and he put all the violence that had gotten the X rating back, and they didn't flinch that time because it was like the 3rd time it had been like re-rated. It's like so ridiculous. And it just kind of makes you wonder, like, what is getting the rating in the first place? Are they just wigging out or what?
I especially like that first opening scene, or the scene that was so much of a problem for the ratings with the boardroom scene, because I'm always a fan of movies that just set you off on the right foot. And that scene, when that scene happens, because it's the juxtaposition of like the staid, quiet, traditional boardroom of buttoned up, and then this thing comes in and just was really brutally murders this
Yeah.
board guy.
Be our guinea pig, be our demonstration.
Yeah, exactly. And it just right off the bat, you're like buckle up. This movie is pulling no punches.
I love that part of that scene where he puts the gun down and everyone's laughing, and then it keeps counting down and everyone just has the same reaction of just like,
Yep.
oh shit.
Yeah.
And all the other boardroom people just getting him away from them and just not wanting to deal with the problems that he's dealing with, just pushing him away like pit fighter. It was awesome.
Oh, totally.
The marked man.
It's just so wild how, if you don't know Kurtwood Smith for this and just other movies or even that 70s show, him definitely as the villain on this.
Yeah, he's an amazing
Boddicker, man.
villain.
Clarence Boddicker.
I can't believe he didn't have even more of an illustrious career as a villain.
Right? Oh, yes. He's been in Fortress. He's been in, I think, you remember him in A Time to Kill?
Mm-hmm.
He's the main KKK member.
Is he the Klan member?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the rest of the time, he's often playing a military or, Washington advisor guy. But he's in that one cool Star Trek Voyager time travel two-parter. But, yeah.
And I like some of the stuff in the movie was improvised by him.
It had to be, yeah, because it's just so intense. And
the spitting on the desk when he was getting booked, like spitting blood, was him. So was the gum on the secretary's little like nameplate. Which
I love that.
That secretary became his wife.
Wow, so it worked.
It worked.
That scene was
Pick-up
amazing.
line.
It was just
that they got married. I think they had I don't know if they're still married, but they had a long marriage. Yeah,
that's awesome.
The extreme confidence that was exhibited in that. Not only is this guy like kind of an ugly dude to begin with, he's like covered in scabs and scars and like actively bleeding, and then takes his gum and is just like really laying it on thick with this woman, and then sticks it on her desk and says, "You can keep the gum." It's like there's the confidence just oozing out of this guy. Was
and
amazing.
The production values are so good, and everyone is so consistent with the tone of it. And it's just a shame that, again, Sony and all the other execs, would be looking at Verhoeven and they would be taking it at face value, and it's like, no, obviously there's always going to be people who don't know, but it's the satire, guys. It is a violent, live action cartoon with some heart and emotion on occasion, just for dramatic effect. But at the end of the day, you're going to laugh at this just as wickedly as you would at some Joe Dante horror movie, or be creeped out like you would at a Cronenberg, B picture. It is interesting to seeing how the content does kind of make the movie, and to describe it, just nothing does it justice,
Yeah, it's nice how they're able to sort of like weave all that violence and the subplots and the satire in with just hilarious lines throughout the movie too.
Absolutely. And it's done with, like you say, it's not done soullessly. It's done so it intersects so well without feeling like too many cooks in the kitchen or something. And looking at reviews of the Blu-ray, it seems like a lot of them were noticing they had to be very meticulous about remastering, the unrated version, because for the longest time you only saw it on Amazon Prime. You guys saw your version on Tubi, but it was, for the longest time, that was where a lot of people were seeing it who couldn't find the sold out DVD. And they, to restore the elements and match it up with the frames, they really had to remaster the elements because the work print and actual elements were very limited. So they were able to use a lot of special HD enhancement to make the process not seem noticeable. But yeah, the network TV versions are even more funny because, it's just one brief moment and everyone freaks out, and when the rest of the time it's pretty just straightforward, gunplay.
Did you watch any of the other TV versions before? Like, I remember back in the day they used to throw words in there that didn't exist instead of like, what I mean? They would change it to like butthead or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen YouTube compilations, and the reason they all vary is they even just like, sometimes they do like just brief fade ins. You're like, just so you can't see the mouse moving, is like, that's pretty choppy editing. That wouldn't fly today. But yeah, local stations would do it. They just wanted to they could literally have just redubbed the dialogue or something. But yeah, it's just a tough nut to crack. I don't even really see it all aired all that much on cable TV nowadays. Unless it's
No, it used to be on all the time. Back in Boston, they had WSBK TV 38, and it was like a special. We were always at like a weekend at around 2. RoboCop is coming on.
Oh, sweet.
Not anymore, though. You're right. Although I don't even know how to put channels anymore, so who knows if it's on.
No, trust me. I've been studying it, and if anything, part 2 or 3 would come on WGN or the Spanish channel, and you're like, I got better things to watch.
I don't know if this is allowed on your show, but do you have a favorite commercial that they aired, or like bit one of the either a news segment or
one of the earlier reports when he's first out and about, stopping muggers is kind of funny. But I mean, my sister and I will commonly just say I buy that for $1 because we know all about
that. Yeah, I mean that's for better or worse one of the lines that I feel like has lived on the most from this movie. Like you still hear people make that reference.
People just get the whole commercialism. I like how Free Guy and even Gremlins do similar moments.
Yep.
It's so easy to make fun of
news
business.
clips. The news clips were amazing, as were all the little ads for the game, like Nukem and these.
Nukem was the best. That was incredible.
It was so good.
But yeah, the news segments of just like some space station tried to boot up and killed 113 people in Santa Barbara, including 2 former presidents. Amazing.
Right. Oh man.
And I think they also refer to that like space laser as the peace platform, which that was a great little touch.
Right.
Yeah, the verbiage of this is so great too, because I think it kind of capitalizes on like, what George Carlin used to make fun of, and just sort of like changing what the words mean, but not the action. So like Ed 209's job was urban pacification, which was just like, let's kill a bunch of people in poor districts.
Oh yeah. There's some. It's just wild all the places they filmed it. I know they filmed part of it in Dallas at one point due to tax cuts, and it's like it's supposed to be like a mirror of like a Detroit type city or something like that.
Yeah, Detroit didn't have the layout for the buildings of like futuristic stuff that they wanted, I guess. So that's why but Dallas had like some cool buildings and a lot of open spaces. With the deep LMS part of Dallas, they did some recording there with like the warehouse stuff.
Right.
I think they also filmed in Pittsburgh too.
I believe it, and it's like you say, it's just interesting to seeing how. It just these small edits, these and stuff. Just some people just think it just makes a difference, but yeah, I do think it's funny how. Like you mentioned earlier, how the George Carlin's 7 Dirty Words. I saw a CNN doc on comedy, and like 3/4 of those words were actually able to be on bleeps. They were allowed to say shit in the documentary, and it's cable. Years ago, you can't ever be heard saying that. It's like, it's just funny what just trips up some people. I did see a cool MGM HD. That's a cool cable channel that shows stuff from the vault on there, and they played one of the featurettes, and they didn't even give a rating. I think so many people are just done with it. It's like they're done just playing games and rating everything. Just played in the morning hours. No one complains. Truth be told, I guess a lot of people who just have cable TV, they've already gone through all the whole loopholes. It's like the minute you get to college, is like that's on you. Just you can't be, it depends on your parents as well. I had a pal who was allowed to see anything. Just the only movie he could not bring, his mom would give him money to, for the video store, and he could bring back anything as long as it wasn't The Exorcist, because it creeped her out. So it is funny just seeing just what trips up some people.
Yeah, where the line gets drawn is always an interesting question.
Totally.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to see it. I probably first saw it for the first time as a TV edit. The first experience I had with it was a neighbor who had there was an older brother over there who had seen it, but he also had like the video game on an old school platform of
Oh wow.
PC. That was awesome. I think it was like either, I don't know if an NES or Genesis game too, but that was all my experiences before actually seeing the movie.
Yeah, there was a lot.
It was just known to be so violent. Like as a kid, it's tough to watch when you're 5.
Right. Isn't it funny how much like they were making toys of, to R-rated movies like Terminator 2, Alien.
Right. You'd have the toy of RoboCop, but you haven't seen the movie yet.
Yeah, they were so cool with all those giant cannons and everything. And same thing with the games. The games are going to be either E or T because there's, animated violence, but very rarely bloody results. I know there was like a GameCube game and it got like just terrible ratings because like apparently just like it just had choppy AI and it was messy. So
and even in the movie, right, with the RoboCop mimicking the moves and lines off of TV, like that sort of brings in the whole sort of like childlike element of this is playing, this is not real, this is for fun. But then he's like blasting people away.
That's
right.
Pretending this TJ laser moves.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. And it's just it happens with just like so many other different movies and shows, and it does make you wish that for the longest time you could get those alternate versions on TV, on home video, but it just no one made the time for it. They're like, hey, they want to see it, let's show it to them uncut.
I think it was
surprised.
I'm glad. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying I'm glad the first version I saw when I was probably 8 or 9 was the TV version. It probably would have been too much for me to see the unrated or the other versions, the non-made for TV.
Yeah, I would definitely see parts of it on HBO or Cinemax when I was way too young, and it freaked me out when Murphy.
Yeah, it would have been too much for sure. Like I watched that. I put the first part on with my wife with the Ed 209 part, and she was just like, Jesus, like it was like she was taken aback. So I can't imagine like 8-year-olds trying to watch the unrated version.
Like a sliding doors Grove Street moment. Who knows what Bob we'd have right now if you had seen the other version.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think I would be living on the streets and life would be different.
And it's just wild how like just certain like I was even told this with certain movies I have to rewatch, like just like how there's like slightly extra seconds that do actually like change the course of a movie, and you're like, really, how can it be that fast? But apparently it is a thing. But yeah, I was told that with the Descent, like there's like 5 seconds more in the ending, and that changes like the course of the whole movie, let alone the tone. I'm like, well, I guess I'll rewatch it one more time because the other version I saw was like the theatrical, and that's why it wasn't as good.
I think if I were gonna cut out a scene and I was like, thinking I'm gonna show this to my child, what brief scene do I need to cut out? I think I would cut out the scene where one of the guys in the gang is peeing inside the factory, because I feel like you don't want to show a child someone peeing indoors, on like not in a bathroom,
right? And
that's,
we're just saying
that's the only thing that I wouldn't want.
Yeah, because everyone's different. Some kids can handle violent movies because they have a cartoonish sense of the world and they know it's fantasy, and there's others is like, yeah, no, wait till you're at least 14, 15.
We'll return after these messages.
Do you ever find yourself thinking about who would win in a fight between Goku and Superman? Hi, I'm James Gavsey, and on the Who Would Win show, me and my co-host Ray ignore anything important happening in the outside world and debate fictional battles between characters from comics, movies, and video games.
We got a new show every week, and almost always am I the winner.
Yeah, not true, Ray.
In the past, we've discussed such matches as Captain America versus Darth Vader, Solid Snake versus the Iron Giant, classic matchups like Robocop versus Terminator, and even the Muppets versus Sesame Street.
That one was crazy. So if you're a fan of geek culture and love a spirited debate, check out the Who Would Win show wherever you get your podcasts, or check us out at whowouldwinshow.com.
We let things pile up in the DVR, we add them to our queues, we wait for the DVDs and Blu-rays. We time shift, The Time Shifters Podcast. Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, superheroes, comedy, action, film, television, maybe some not-so-current events. Find us on iTunes or at timeshifterspodcast.com.
Cool thing about Blind Knowledge is we are in multiple countries. We are worldwide all across the globe. We are in the US. We are in the UK. We are in Canada, Germany, India, Japan. We're in Australia, y'all. BlindKnowledge.com. Now back to the feature presentation.
Dragon Ball Z, One Piece, Naruto, all things that we love, all manga that were originally published in the legendary magazine Weekly Shonen Jump.
But not every series can run for 300 chapters and have a hit anime. This is David.
This is Jordan.
We're the hosts of Shonen Flop. Each episode we look at manga that ran in Jump that didn't quite make it.
We discuss what it did wrong, what it did right, how the series could have turned itself around, and ultimately, was it a flop or not?
We're on all your favorite podcast apps, and you can find us at shonenflop.com.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
Well, yeah, I'll show my young child Murphy's hand getting blown off, but I don't want to see him. I don't want him to see someone peeing indoors on like a wall or something, because that'll
right. All of a sudden, your kid's peeing on the chair on the couch.
Yeah,
well, I saw it on Robocop.
Right. So. It's funny. We're seeing the bad guy do something bad, so we know, okay, that's bad. But if we see him misbehaving,
I know this is out of left field, but I'm not sure there's a better scene than Robocop throwing Bottinger through like 5 different plates of glass. I don't know if it changes in the uncut versions or whatever.
No, because you literally can't. You can't change it at all. It's like so vital. There's some dialogue, but maybe there might be 2 different close-ups of the blood on his face, but it's not vast enough like an impalement or anything that would affect the rating, I don't think. But yeah, so like pretty much it's Murphy's death and the opening Massacre by a 209 that really affects the rating. And I guess you could say the dispatching of the henchmen, especially because the shooting of the mugger in the nuts is supposed to be hysterical.
What a great I've notified the rape crisis center for you. That whole scene was
right. It's just wild how it's just there's even just so many other just like extended cuts and just different movies and shows, and it makes you wonder why they even like film it. Is like they just want. There's even other movies that there's been an unrated version, but people forget.
I'm surprised more streaming services don't offer up both the ability to watch different cuts and the sort of like the featurettes and things that would be on a DVD or on a Blu-ray that used to be great when you would buy that, and all this content is out there.
There were so many DVD. I mean, as a former movie store clerk, there were so many DVDs out there with such great bonus features. It is funny. You're right that like you can't order these movies sometimes on like Prime or whatever and get some of these like director's cuts and little Easter eggs and commentary and stuff. That'd be cool.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense because all these streaming services are always so hungry for content. This already exists.
Basically, they just couldn't predict it, but at the same time, it's like they just knew it was going to get intense or some shit. But they to even have different features and have to buy the same movie like 3 different times for the extended or the unrated is also just like a hassle. And then, like you say, they're all collector's items. So unless you are a hardcore fan of the movie, there's really no reason to get it, And not everyone has $500, around for movies, Oh man.
Now, if you had a safe, would you hide it under a pyramid of Miller Lite cans?
I wouldn't use empty ones because I feel like those get knocked over so easily.
It's a good question because, I just. I mean,
it's like, what if somebody comes in and wants to buy all those? It seems like, I mean, Miller Lite's good enough.
Yeah, just a bunch of singles.
Yeah. I mean, it clearly wasn't much of a secret also.
Did the other versions of RoboCop do the toxic waste Emil scene differently? Because I think that's one
TV
of the most...
they would cut away differently or use an alternate frame, when he's fighting the now mutant version of that henchman. Yeah.
That just giant vat labeled toxic waste too is so great. It was such an 80s thing. Just
The 80s things were just so many vats. Yeah, so many vats of toxic waste. That's how the Joker happened in the original Batman. He just found us some toxic waste and out comes some other version of you.
It's a dangerous time to be alive, I guess.
Yeah, it is pretty dangerous. And it's just interesting just seeing how, even just slight changes in dialogue and everything. I always look for, I make it a habit of even getting region free, foreign Blu-rays of certain movies because, it does enhance the experience and give a different perspective. I had the uncut version of Johnny Mnemonic, way better movie than if you see the.
Is it?
Yeah,
I think that qualifies for our pod. By the way,
it does.
But
it's on another
I'd like
list.
to see the uncut version.
Yeah, you can get the German Blu-ray. I think one of the other U.S. distributors are working on it, but it's rescored, re-edited. You actually know why the villains are trying to kill him instead of just what's going on.
Yeah, because I watched the standard version. I don't know, a few months ago, and I watched a lot of movies, and I feel like I'm pretty good at watching movies, and I was very confused.
I think you're a very good movie watcher, and if you're confused, I think it's the movie's fault.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. Because, and the problem is, if you see again just a different version of the movie and it leaves a bad, taste in your mouth, you're just, and it was always one of those growing up. I'm like, I feel like there's a good movie in there somewhere, but the one I'm seeing is just very junky, and so, yeah, it's just interesting what stuff you can find that really does enhance it.
It's crazy, especially those instances where it's such a better movie when there's another cut, yet that's not the movie that was broadly released. It's like, it just makes me really think how flawed is the process, whatever the studio process is that gets you to a point where this just incomprehensible movie or a movie that just doesn't hit as hard as whatever the other alternate cuts are. How could you possibly have trusted a process that led you to that?
Absolutely. Did the directors just say no too many times and get fired, or was it always going to be that way where the producer's like, I got to have final control, a good final say? And I'll tell you what, I'll email the uncut version of it to you.
Oh, nice.
Sweet. Oh, that'll probably make it on our pod. That's awesome.
Okay, even better. But because there were others who were like, oh no, I can't, that movie was a chore. I'm like, I'm telling you, it's a different movie.
Yeah, we just did our first Blumhouse movie the other day, and I think so many of those movies come out so just the viewpoint of the directors are always so clear because they give directors final say in what the movie looks like, and that's seems to be a winning formula. I don't know why everyone doesn't stick with that.
Yeah, and it's just
some notes are good. I agree. Stan, that it's great to have the director have their view, but some notes work out. I know this movie, they didn't have Bottinger and Jones. What is it, Dick Jones?
Yeah, Dick Jones.
They didn't have them linked initially in the story. They were just separate entities, but then they brought them together. Be like, oh yeah, let's have Bottinger, Clarence work for Dick Jones, and that was a note from Orion. Which is pretty cool because usually you don't get good notes from the studio.
Yeah.
Usually it's less of this, less of that, and sometimes it's like Michael Cimino. There's different versions of Heaven's Gate, in some of his other movies, but he got a big ego because he started out as an award winner, and so then next thing you know, How the Mighty Have Fallen, and so it is just interesting to seeing how the course of something can change. And because like you say, yes, the studio execs often, as George Lucas has often said himself, is like, filmmakers aren't, aren't studio guys, and studio guys aren't filmmakers, and it's interesting to see how, sometimes the notes just don't make any sense. Like, we want a talking cat here. We want to some in-movie advertising that doesn't help the movie.
Yeah, it's like Wayne's World, right? Like when he's like, "Oh, we have to add a hot chick to the movie."
Yeah,
but it's not. You can't really work that in.
Oh man.
Where does the 6000 SUX stand up in your fake cars pantheon?
Ooh, too easy to explode, I think.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it works because it is satirical, but yeah, there are other moments. It's funny how I don't really see anyone complain about any of the physics or anything in this because they like how it's fleshed out. But yeah, it would be it's just awesome seeing how this movie has stuff that would be problematic in a different movie with a different filmmaker and a different tone. You know, any other movie, it would have probably been a Canon Films, you know. Type movie, which
yeah, it's cool. This movie was supposed to be like a low budget sci-fi kind of like nothing movie, and then it just like blew up into this. I mean, there's 3 Robocops.
I mean, kind of like the Terminator. They thought it was just going to be easy,
Yeah.
tax write-off, not even make any money, and it got lukewarm to decent reviews and made its money back. And even though it had a limited run, so it's like there's just, I don't even know why some people want something to just not be good. I mean, and even if they don't have any faith in the project, why not, you know, again, promote it so you can make your money back instead of have to, you know, pay your investors back out of your own pocket.
Yeah, it's weird that like studios try to distance themselves before it even comes out. It's like you would think you'd want to.
Yeah. All the time I would see TV shows that were canceled, and you see sketchy stuff like the payroll would close its doors so they wouldn't have to pay extras, especially if they got word that something had been canceled. It's like, geez, you know, the cost of doing business really is significant, you know. Some people just don't want to be honest. But so you brought up some good points on just how you could introduce this movie to other people, and how just are there any other movies that you think just kind of that just should never be on network TV just because each time people try to modify it, they just make it look worse or unintentionally funny?
I think that happens with like R-rated comedy movies when they change.
Oh yeah, comedy's pretty bad. Some segments they'll skip altogether, and so someone will bring that up at work, and you're like, "What segment are you talking about?" Oh, you saw the TBS Spike TV version. Okay, got it. And it's funny how cable TV, they want to modify every general movie just so that most people can access it, and then you know, nighttime, it's just hit and miss. Sometimes they play it uncut like Comedy Central after midnight, other times they don't. But yeah, the TV shows, they'll often let them play uncut. But even USA Network was a little confusing. They would play versions of The Sinner or Treadstone modified, where they just would bleep out the language, even though the sex and violence was blurring that line, you know, between.
But you're right. Like those networks, it's so funny when you catch one of these type of movies, and maybe you catch it during the day, and it's one movie, and then somehow you catch like Comedy Central or USA or some other network that wasn't HBO or Premiere, and it would somehow be the actual version from the DVD, and it would just be like mind blowing. Like you thought you found this hidden gem because Robocop came at midnight, and you got to see everything.
Bingo. And that was the kind of the wild thing too, is like they would premiere on the movie channels like months before they went to the video store, even though they weren't like originals by the channel. They just wanted, you know, to be the first to premiere it. That was their bragging rights. And so then it just kind of blurred that line. It's like, okay, well, I guess it's made for TV because it, you know, it wasn't released to video first or the theaters. It just premiered on the movie channel. Altogether, early Tarantino you just can't do. I think
I was thinking the same thing, like pretty anything Tarantino, because I think it comes
the
up.
Latest ones, I didn't really notice too much difference with Inglourious Bastards. It actually trims it down a lot, but Django would be interesting. I'm not sure how that works.
I feel like Kill Bill, the Kill Bill movies are on a bit.
Kill Bill, you kind of get the gist of. They just edit the license plate and insults a bit, but it's the same basic movie.
And he did it himself by making it black and white for that Crazy 88 scene.
Yeah, yes, he did. He had fun with that when he I know Scorsese, oversees everything. He makes his blood, he kind of pulls a Lord of the Rings where he makes all the blood black, where if it were, rapid red, like a Gladiator movie or a Kingdom of Heaven film, it would be R.
We just did that with, oh man, what was the last movie we did?
Black Christmas.
Black Christmas. I went to
Yes,
see that in 2019. They make all the blood black so that it could be a PG-13 movie.
Right. It's funny how that changed. Is I would see TV shows do that too, and then there's even just it's interesting just seeing what why do you think it is that based on the format like determines everything, like stuff that would get an R or a very hard PG-13 like Minority Report or Lord of the Rings, gets a TV-14 rating on, a typical primetime TV show like X-Files or 24 CSI. It's like it's the time zone half the time, and other times it's like it makes you just wonder, could they have just had a PG-15, because there's plenty of movies that are R, but just because they say the F word 3 times in one scene, or like you say, just it's not like Robocop, like where it's explosive, but there's like just free gunshots that just didn't sit well with someone, but the rest of the movie's pretty tame. So it's just like
it's also the evolution of the rating system, because you go back to movies like Jaws is the famous example. It's a PG movie.
Oh, totally. You want to talk even foreign cuts, you get the Transporter or Taken Blu-rays uncut, like the unrated versions. It's the French version, and you can actually see the fight scenes more coherently, and they have shotgun blasts that would totally have gotten an R, and just off-color dialogue and sexual innuendo. So it's like, yeah, it's wild how they had to speed these movies up and CGI, like remove the blood and shots of drug victims just to get PG-13s in the States for either of those Luc Besson films. And then it's just wild. And in many ways, I actually think those are actually better versions. Like you could even say that about the first Alien versus Predator. You actually get some more plot lines instead of the junky movie. It's still a C movie, but it's just it's wild what stuff is very significantly different, and other stuff like you can actually see what's going on, but I don't even know.
I know you can see it like in the same movie from different DVDs across the world, but it's also funny seeing different genres of movies from different parts of the world. So you
different genres, yeah.
South Korean horror world or Japanese horror, there are lines that they cross that would not be okay
it wouldn't even get an X rating. It just would not.
Yeah, the whole like revenge trilogy in South Korea, like I forget the name of the
Old Boy.
Oh boy, yep, yeah. Exactly.
Those that whole genre.
Exactly.
They would have to be released unrated at an art house theater. Yeah. It's some.
They're just like, nah, it's just an hour movie, man. It's moving along.
Yeah, did you ever see the original like Dawn of the Dead at a video store, and they would always say like, 17 only.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just funny. It's like it was released R, but they didn't restrict it as back then during the drive-in scene until like the 80s and 90s, where they would pull a Charlie Van and they'd re-release a movie with different cuts, just to get their money back. And now people caught on to it, and that's when home video took over, and it was harder to distribute independent movies. So it is funny how, like you say, it's just no one could predict it, and yet here we are now where we're just having to always argue about, hey, watch that version of the movie, it makes better sense. I waited to see the Wolverine uncut, and I didn't have Blu-ray back then, so I just bought it through iTunes, and we saw it uncut there. It was a way different movie, but it would have gotten an R, had they released it that way, just because it has just like 3 more arrows to the face and 3 extra F-bombs. But
it'd be cool and like content's obviously very, very difficult or impossible to sort of grade across different films and TV shows, but it would be cool to see like the evolution of a PG-13 rating or an R rating over time, what that reflects about society and what society,
and how Spielberg is like the only one who can like complain, because it's like he started it up because he was tired of having to deal with that process. Like Temple of Doom and Last Crusade would probably be R if they were made by anybody else, but because it's fantasy and adventure, and they're able to appeal. There are some other ones. A lot of people in the UK got a different version of Coulson's death, so so they were even more confused when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. came out, because they're like, I saw 5 extra frames of him being stabbed by Loki. He did, while in the US it's ambiguous. You're like, I think he's okay. I didn't see any detail. But yeah, that freaked him out. And it's just 5 seconds of a frame approximately that you got to cut. Transformers, believe it or not, almost got an R just for that end sequence. It was too intense. And I saw my mother and uncle overreacting to that. I'm like, seriously? I mean, even when it's, not very sympathetic, like other Michael Bay or Roland Emmerich movies where millions of people died off screen via the Death Star type moment, on a Statue of Liberty. It is interesting. It's like, that was like left to the imagination. So I think half the time it is someone has just a very vivid imagination. You're like, you got that from this? No. And I know Spielberg did allow his war movies to be uncut on, like Saving Private Ryan and Schindler's List got played uncut on ABC and NBC like for years on the States. And it was kind of like PBS, where there's like viewer discretion advised, played at 10 o'clock,
Yep.
I still see Private Ryan often modified. They leave the violence uncut, but they, leave out some of the language, the FUBAR. Schindler's List, I did see uncut on USA Network for like its 20th anniversary, and it was so cool because they were promoting the Blu-ray that had come out with a documentary on the Jewish museum that the film helped fund. But even though they kept claiming, oh, it's uncut, there was moments where it's like there's some partial boob nudity that they're censoring. I'm like, guys, that's like the least offensive thing in this movie.
But that's the stuff that resonates. I remember being a kid and I would watch all these like horrific violent movies like Scarface and Robocop,
Cannibal Holocaust.
I put on not Time Cop. What's the Stallone cop movie? That's my first favorite.
Demolition Man.
Stone. Sorry?
Demolition Man.
No. Sharon Stone.
The Specialist.
The Specialist. Yeah. I had watched like so many action movies. I've seen hundreds of people die when I was a kid, pre-10, but there's like, a shower boob scene, and my dad races over and covers my eyes.
It's like the one thing they don't want anyone
seeing, like somebody blow up in front of me. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, it's like, and then never mind. And there's some movies where it's like they're so cartoonish that to even get offended by them, like if anyone's watching Tango and Cash, I'm just like, have fun. For anyone to take any of those seriously, you have to be like a really brainwashed toxic male, or maybe one of the bad guys on screen, And then there are other ones where like you say is like, you were offended by someone snorting drugs, really? Yeah, but millions of people dying, that wasn't disturbing.
Those shows up on the ratings where it says like alcohol use. That shows up, or smoking.
Yeah, that they freak out about that, even though you're going to see that on like a Millennium or Law and Order episode. Yeah, it's just interesting seeing what offends at certain times of the day. I even see earlier Law and Order episodes where they censor out certain crime scene photos. I'm like, wow. I don't know. And some stuff today just wouldn't offend us nowadays, just because we're so used to the news cycle. But there are other ones where it's like, yeah, it's just, even though you don't see anything, it's just, some of it's even more questionable when it has actual culturally significant or historical content. It's like, well, you should see this because it is vital, it is important, but at the same time, it's going to wipe you out. So, I've the most R-rated stuff that got smuggled past me when I was growing up was probably Monty Python, because it's just like, the intent is clear, and then there's other ones where it's like, and there are other ones where it is amazing how it's like that 3-year difference does actually make a difference in your maturity, and actually you're not laughing at, I was one of the few kids in my school who, when I was watching, some of these mature cartoons, I was actually getting it. I was laughing at it. And as opposed to the other guys who were just laughing at it because it's naughty, I heard 5 F words, it's like, well, you're not getting the essence of it, of this South Park Family Guy cartoon. It actually would freak my dad out when he would actually find out, wait, teens are allowed to watch that? I thought we were just watching with you because, wow. Blows my mind. And so, it's wild because I'd be watching with him on TV and he just wouldn't flinch an eye, like all those spaghetti westerns and James Bond movies and Family Guy. Like that, no, that's not for kids. That's a lot. That's on network TV. Oh wow. Kids.
I like some like the gamesmanship too that would go on between directors and the ratings agencies too, where they try to like put worse things in so that they could have some like horse trading that could go on. Like,
did you hear about the
the
Van Damme Street Fighter?
No, what was that one?
Okay, so basically the filming behind the scenes, it almost rivals Apocalypse Now, where it's just very hectic behind the scenes. The stunt coordinator Chuck Pacerni hates director Stephen E. D'Souza making his debut. Him for his work writing 48 Hours and Die Hard.
Yep.
And it was just so funny. So the crew's not getting along. Kylie Minogue and Van Damme are sleeping together off set. People are coming in late, high on drugs, and having to refigure out fight scenes and everything because they're having to go from different filming and they're getting weather difficulties. But then it finally gets to, they have a bunch of shootouts. The MPAA, cries murder, cut that out, or it's going to get an R. They cut out those violent fight scenes, or anything that just has blood or gunshot, impact, and they get a G. And so then you're just like, how jaded are you guys? So then they just refilm one extra fight scene with Van Damme, and he improvises a F word. and then it finally gets that desired PG-13. So it's wild how they were aware of it back then. And yet somehow that must have just slipped into the 2000s. They must have just said, oh, because in between, I'm wondering what happened in between the Matrix sequels and Deadpool. Because I keep seeing podcasters say and reviewers say, oh, R-rated movies do make money. So I'm like, well, they always did. So who spread that falsehood?
Oh, is that a thing? R-rated movies don't make money?
They just, I think they must have been influenced by the studio who think it wouldn't make any money. They just weren't looking at the numbers of other stuff. It's like, you're going to see it if you like the movie. I would always see just about every Nightmare on Elm Street or Jeepers Creepers type movie was selling out theaters next door to kids movies and, PG-13 stuff. There's other stuff. I wonder how much of it is actually just the themes or content. I've heard that sometimes the sound of a neck snapping or the knife impalement sound effect Foley is just kind of what trips people up.
Yeah, we just did like we just said Black Christmas, which is PG-13 horror movie.
Even though you're hearing and seeing just about everything that would otherwise get an R. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And they did have we even made it a point, like the neck snapping scene has just so many sounds to it because they realized they already got in with the PG-13, I think, so they just try to like ramp up the neck snapping because they didn't show much gore.
Yeah.
Man, it was that neck snapping sound was worse than like most gory scenes I've seen.
Yeah,
I wonder how much of it is just it freaks people out because it must just be just whoever the censors are. I mean, you see that even with video games. They vary on what they show violence wise, and sometimes the blood's not that bad and they give it a T, and other times I saw too much covering the screen, it's got to get an M.
Yeah, what the old NHL from Genesis in like '94 almost got an M because you could empty someone's head full of blood with a body check.
Wow. And there was one wrestling game which I thought got a little graphic at age 7 when I was playing it at, it wasn't even a friend's house. It was a douchebag who invited us over, and we found out the hard way, oh, he's a douchebag from school. And we're playing this violent wrestling game. I'm like, why are we here? shouldn't even be playing this in front of them at a young age. It gets even more wild how, you'd play a game like Mortal Kombat or Halo, and they would allow you to turn off the cursing or gore, and made a totally different experience. It's still you're getting.
That's right. Mortal Kombat did have that like setting, right? Yeah.
And sometimes it would affect it, and other times it's like, no, it's not bad. And then you go to the arcades, and you still see the blood, but it wasn't as vast as later console versions ended up being. Sometimes you'd see parents getting offended by it, even when they didn't see anything. It's just throwing shuriken, at Scorpion. It was like, I don't know. It seemed like with Scorsese when he was making Taxi Driver, just what they freaked out was just the color of the blood itself. It was an Argento film.
So that's part of the evolution of the R.
I think so. And the filter would look different, when we didn't know how it is nowadays with digital, when you're color correcting how that looks and everything. It's wild. And it's wild how when I watch some primetime TV, what shows where I'm like, that's okay, that can be handled by a 15-year-old, and what they're implying there, I really don't want anyone under 16 seeing that, or the first part of that episode was 13, that violent climax would probably get an R. It's just, and then it gets even more weird since all these primetime shows that are playing in the evening are, you'd see even naughtier SNL skits that would be played, that have bloopers, and they'd be playing in the daytime. They'd have to censor that part, on reruns. Oh, it's so, like you say, it's a never-ending mess. Any version of Touch of Evil, which we'll review on here, would probably be a PG-13, even though it's a very, very grim world. It's kind of the Dark Knight of its day and age. And speaking of the Dark Knight, there's so much violence in that, where it's like, that would have gone in an R, but because they flinch away from it and it's in your mind, and enough pressure from Nolan and company saying this superhero movie must be PG-13, that's like the only compromise.
I do feel like you get kind of a pass, like you throw a cape on somebody.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, this is so clearly make believe.
Or it just has to be
a cape and you don't show blood, and all of a sudden you can do anything.
Or just show the impact. Like it just can't be just you can show like surgical blood and a gunshot, like you see it in the Captain America films. You even see it in the RoboCop remake. It can't just be
Is that RoboCop remake good? It's $49.49 for Rotten Tomatoes.
I'd be happy to review it with you. My sister and I saw it in theaters, and we actually loved it. We like it cool. I like it like I love Training Day and Dread.
Yep.
But that was a deal breaker. There were so many other people who were never going to like it, because the minute they heard remake, they were like, nope. And I was like, considering all the trouble that guy who had done the Elite Squad films, I think he had worked on City of God, if I'm not mistaken, Jose Padilla. So yeah, I liked his take, how he basically same politics as RoboCop. Imagine if it was in modern day, with even more crooked, rampant type scandals.
Have you seen that, Steamer?
I haven't.
Yeah. Some people found it forgettable, others found it decent, and some really hate it. I really like it. If you like the new Planet of the Apes movies or Dread, I think you would like this one, just because it wasn't trying. Because, like you say, it wasn't trying to be like some of these horror movie remakes where you're like, oh, let's see how many stupid teens we can get in, and get away with. I don't think the studio cared. No, they didn't care at all. But the filmmakers definitely had a vision. That's all I can ask for, a different rehash. It's like, because you see so many others where it's like with Psycho 98, it's like, why did they remake that?
Right.
The same movie with more bizarre angles, more slightly graphic content. Big difference between that and Bates Motel, where it's a reimagining. And everyone thought at first, oh, it's a prequel. It's like, no, here's our take on how Norman Bates grew up. We're going to do some nods to the original movie, and then we're going to end the storyline after 5 years. It is interesting how some of them get away with it, but it has to be like Better Call Saul is probably the most seen prequel / spinoff, a Breaking Bad. It's interesting how I think the reboot word has ruined it for a lot of people. They hear reboot and they're like, oh great, fuck this.
I just watched the Jay and Silent Bob reboot, and they went over the differences of reboot versus
and
remake.
see, and no one freaked about that because it was making fun of Hollywood. So it's like you have to, I guess, use certain keywords to avoid tripping up, I guess, your audience. I don't know what it is. It seems like some people get the joke, and then there's other ones where it's like, I still see parents flipping out when, oh my god, Deadpool's rated R. I'm like, well, personally, I see zero reason to be offended when every other commercial says rated R or has it in glowing giant yellow letters on a movie poster. But even if you somehow miss that during a radio ad or what have you, like, what part of the trailer made you think that was for kids?
Yeah, I think some people don't even give it any thought. They're like, it's a comic book movie, so I'll let my kids see it. And they don't.
I think that's it, because they must not be seeing much of it, or they must be thinking, oh, it's Ryan Reynolds, he's funny. And it's like, well, it's so, yeah.
He is. It is.
Yeah,
fun.
no, he is. But I mean, it's kind of like, do you want PG Eddie Murphy or do you want R-rated Eddie Murphy? It's just, do you want R-rated Jack Black or do you want PG-13 Jack Black? It's all, like you say, is like they're not paying attention to the context or even the content. I had one of my aunts come in. My mother had invited her to watch one of those dumb award shows, and someone was making a childbirth segment, but she had come in midway through, so she didn't get the context of it all. And it's like, okay, they're not even talking about what you think they're talking about. They're making fun of a movie scene that all these award winners know about. So it's just, yeah, if you come in late on the joke, you just got to move on, because some people just don't want to do the research. They don't even want to get it. They just want to kind of accept or reject. You see other people who kind of just shun a movie. Just they look at the runtime. They're like, nope, 200 hours. It's 3 hours of my life. Nope, don't want to do it.
Well, to be fair, I did just recently watch Terrifier 1 after All Hallows Eve, and I saw that Terrifier 2 is like 2.5 hours. So it has put me off a little bit from seeing it. And I do remember like those working at a video store, and you see those like 2 VHS movies. You're like, oh God, it's going to take me a little while to watch Green Mile. I have to have like a whole day set aside for that.
Right. And and if it is a 4-hour director's cut, then you got to make sure both tapes are in stock, because then the renter's going to want the second part, or just not return the tape, and then you're screwed, because now everyone wants to see the extended cut. There's really no difference in content for the Chronicles of Riddick, but it's wild how the blood in that was black, and yet I guess there was like one decapitation even without any blood, and they thought, oh, that'll probably give it an R, even though it was trying to be like Lord of the Rings. And so you just don't know if some people don't apply enough pressure or tell the movie guys, hey, here's the reason of each rating. PG, you can have a few uses of shit or, son of a bitch. But it's, or even just mature content implication, but it just can't, involve, an assault or something very too tragic that a PG audience would accept. 13, same deal. It can have mature subject matter. It just can't have, too much explicit dialogue, or like you say, just pornographic sex and violence. So, and then have the time
that they seem to draw the line at like some explicit language is okay, but like repetitions is not. And it's like, well,
one more BJ
really
reference.
The difference?
Yeah, one more BJ reference and it's getting an X. And but
I think it's like the Key and Peele like crotch thing. You can do like 2 crotch thrusts, but you can't do 3.
Yeah,
like that makes it so you can't say the F word 3 times in a row, but you sparse it out between half hour, you're good to go.
Yeah, you mumble it in one take and then say it twice in one scene. You're okay. But and same thing with violence. Like, oh well, and I would say that all the time where I'd see movies modified on TV. You pretty much saw the same scene. You just didn't see like blood on the windshield in the next take. It's literally like 5-second difference, but you still felt the impact, or they cut away or they skip the scene altogether. It's funny how Total Recall premiered on as a ABC movie of the week of the year, and they they skipped the one scene altogether where his coworkers are trying to kill him, and so you're like, how did he get away? I always heard people talk about it. I'm like, this sounds like a hysterical version. I saw clips. I'm like, yeah, it's just.
It's funny the like censorship that people take upon themselves. I was a teacher for a long time, and some classrooms would show like The Lion King, and they would fast forward through Mufasa's death. Right. And you're like, well, then, like,
what is the point of the movie? Yeah, it's
like
and dancing.
Nothing and makes sense. Time, you don't see where it starts.
Yeah, and it's already bad enough that schools would kind of abuse that privilege. They wouldn't even let you finish the movie. We had to skip through like stuff like Crucible or even modified versions of Glory or Black Hawk Down.
Always Crucible. That big.
Right. And it's like, if I don't see the ending, then you pretty much have told me nothing this entire time. And same thing with, they would show G-rated or PG, kids movies. And you're like, you
start Bambi 10 minutes in.
Yeah, not even ask the kids if their parents would allow them to watch this. And sometimes you get angry letters and like, I don't like to show them cartoons, it melts their brains, or shit like that. And it just gets even just more annoying because you're just like, so who is it even for? Because it's going to show on TV because people want to show edgy content. It was even funny seeing certain versions of certain movies and shows where it's like you're seeing essentially the scene. It's just cropped, so you can't actually see anything graphic, like an impalement or boob shot, but you're still seeing the scene. And then it was always interesting seeing something like Event Horizon, Species, or any of those other, even certain different versions of the Star Trek films, come on UPN and Sci-Fi Channel. And you're like, wow, somewhat different, still essentially the same, but and they changed the dialogue a little there, or sometimes they'd insert a totally different off-color line. You're like, really? Okay, so that was okay, but this wasn't. Okay, whatever. Maybe the director wanted it just as a fun inside joke, and I've had fun looking at all versions of The Godfather, which we'll definitely do on the show, because you get so much great story extensions just editing it in chronological order, the first two movies. But throughout the years they've done that where they would incorporate the rest of part 3 on 2 tapes. And in 06 apparently, and I thought it was just me just blinking, and it's like, they're showing the version that's on AMC or that was originally on NBC, the entire trilogy. And it's like, no, this time now it's on cut.
I feel like my experience with the Godfather trilogy is I think I had like a bootleg DVD.
Yeah.
So many of the scenes were so dark that they were basically as if they were edited out. So when I finally saw like a version you could actually see what was going on, it was like a whole new film. It's amazing.
Totally different film. Yeah. And some versions need to be seen to appreciate some stuff, instead of just, some people will only just go on Wikipedia and IMDb and just read up the differences and not invest time. Like, if you really love a movie, you owe it to yourself to see different versions of it, instead of just, noticing something blatantly obvious like a Blade Runner or Star Wars edit. There's like, okay, that's clearly newer technology. Star Trek the motion picture looks way better because it was newer technology that they didn't have 20 years ago. Some people only like it because of those new effects. I'm like, well, interesting. So it's, and it is funny how, like you say, some of these movies were practically B pictures that just had a bigger budget with, had they not had that A-listers involved, it would basically be a direct-to-video slasher or erotic thriller or violent action movie that came on TV. So it's just funny seeing how the different avenues in which something gets distributed and made. It's funny how some people will actually have that is like, well, because it's made by Brian De Palma or Christopher Nolan, it's different. I'm like, it's still kind of trashy. It doesn't really change the story. It might have more care put into it, yes, but it still would be no different than, say, maybe a Violent USA Network or Skinamax thriller. It's funny how some people, they don't want to draw the line, even though they might make a constant argument about budget. It's like, well, if you're going to be that snobby, you should still, you know, be able to read between the lines. Well, this has been great having you two on here.
Yeah, hold on. Before I feel like we're winding down, I just wanted to get your favorite 80s-esque moment from the movie.
Ooh.
Oh, I definitely have one.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I think
I
mine
have two, but I want to hear before I say them. I want to hear what you guys got.
I think
probably.
Go ahead.
Okay, the way Ronnie Cox and Miguel Ferrer just always dress, they're just kind of doing the usual suit up scene, but I think the cars have a certain 80s look to them, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Definitely the SWAT gear could apply to any timeline, but the other stuff is,
helmets?
Yeah, probably 80s-esque, yeah. How about you?
Mine's maybe, it's maybe not even a moment. It's actually maybe just a piece of furniture, which turned into a moment, but it's the scene where they're all blowing coke, and it's not just a mirror. He actually has an entire coffee table that is a mirror. So it's just like, it was like an entire coffee table designed just for blowing lines. And I was just like, that's the most 80s thing I've ever seen in my entire life.
Exactly. And it's just funny because, like you say, you're just like, really? That tripped you up? And you see even great. Other superhero movies kind of pay tribute to it, just like every other entrance the Joker makes in Batman 89, is every other moment featuring a boardroom scene, I feel like takes from movies like these. They want to show how sleazy some of the scumbags are.
I love the at the boardroom when Ed 209 loses it, and before he kills the dude, somebody else pull the plug on this thing. Like, I love the idea of like the plug, like ED is plugged into the wall somewhere.
Yeah. As if that's gonna make a difference. Yeah,
right. Pull the plug. It's like a TV.
Kind of like, and I mean, it's the same thing with Verhoeven. Is like some people try to dissect Basic Instinct way too much when it's making fun of those kinds of movies. And same thing with Starship Troopers. I would see people say, "Why don't they nuke the planet?" I'm like, that's the thing. You're talking about idiots who have all this war power. It's making fun of the Gulf War. And why does the cameraman watch everyone being massacred? I'm like, because he's a dipshit with a camera. That's the joke. And so, and I mean, there are satirical moments in Total Recall with all the various exchanges. I mean, that's why they cast Schwarzenegger, because they saw what he could do in Commando, and they're like, yeah, he can totally handle this type of over-the-top movie. And yet you'll still see people who, I think I saw Verhoeven's recent movie, Vendetta. It had a review from someone saying, Verhoeven is back in trashy form. I'm like, well, he wasn't ever trashy, but that's how you're taking him. So any attention is good attention. And I'm sure Verhoeven is like, well, whatever, man. Just, if you don't get me, you don't get me.
Yeah, this was great having us on. I'm glad you had us.
Absolutely.
It's a lot of fun.
We're going to have you guys back soon. And any other episodes you want to promote? You mentioned a bunch of ones that you're recording about.
We're recording next time. We're doing a little Christmas horror thing. So we did Black Christmas last episode, and Stan Steamer actually ordered off of Kickstarter a board game of the next movie we're doing, which is Silent Night, Deadly Night, the 1984.
Sweet.
There was a Kickstarter that he got the board game of. So we're recording that this week. So that should be out for
nice.
Christmas.
Sweet. We did that as well, and we everyone wanted to do it, but no one could do it at the same time. So I was splitting it up. I'm like, okay, you're going up in December. You're going up later for this year, and the best moments. That's where I have to do it. Is like best moments, or better yet, let's just talk about the villains. Or
that just flies into like that is. I know it's 84, but it's an early 80s movie.
Oh
it's
yeah,
it's so early 80s. It's awesome.
At first you think, oh, it's gonna be a Christmas Story, and then you're like, oh no. And then just where that whole saga goes, it's even more twisted than and trashy than like freaking Leprechaun, where and it's even kind of meta at times where it's like it's self-aware of how trashy it is, kind of.
Yeah, it is,
which is even more weird because it's like it's so. I think in this day and age now, people are even beyond just the whole so bad it's good. It's like it's just awesome. It owns. It's hard to even give it an actual rating scale because it's breaking all the rules, and at the same time you're massively entertained or you're loving the trashiness. So then it's like, well, it's off the charts. You got to watch it. It's a party movie.
I think that's what it is. You just got to watch it and enjoy.
You're right, especially part 2. I saw, I think it was Cinema Classics, podcast interviewed that Eric Freeman guy, and just how they filmed that whole movie without permits, what other trashy Z-grade stars were supposed to get the lead role that he got, and how Patrick Bateman-esque he kind of is in that.
Yeah, very much so.
And how he's written a script for another comeback movie. I'm like, please make it. And he would share a panel with the director of the first movie who didn't want to share any of the fame. And he's like, come on, dude, we all want to make a buck here. Let's do it. Let's do a continuation of the story you made in part 1, and I'll do my continuation from part 2, and we'll just it could totally work, especially since we've done intentionally cheesy like comeback movies like Birdemic and Samurai Cop have done that. They might as well do it with The Room. Have Tommy Wiseau do it again. But this time everyone is even more in on the joke. So thank you all for being on here, and I wish you well.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was great.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening. It's a